Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Matters Spotlight On. Today we're going to be focused on branding your trust and culture. So I've got a panel of 3 other members to join us. My name's Matt, the founder of Matter. If you're not already a member of Matter, it's completely free to join. Some great benefits for multi-academy trust leaders, and we are already, I believe, 390 trusts strong. So just some housekeeping before I introduce you to the other panel members. Down the right side usually of the chosen platform that you're on, you'll have a comment section, so feel free to put in any questions throughout the session. This is an interactive session, so we would encourage any questions, any comments. You can put them to specific members or us as a whole panel, and then we'll try our best to hopefully give you the right answers or some good advice. So we will appear them on screen a little bit like this. So we'll put them up on screen and then hopefully try our best. So without further ado, we'll get into the first guest. So I will introduce Rachel. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Matt. How are you doing? Nice to see you.
Not too bad. So Rachel, can you introduce your role?
Yes, I'm the Director of HR and Education Strategy at One Education. We're a company that works exclusively in the education sector with all different education settings, obviously including academies and multi-academy trusts, providing all different sorts of services, back office support services, and directly to teachers, leaders, and indeed pupils themselves.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So very well placed to talk about culture, very much so on this conversation as well. I'll add in the next panel member. Hi, Andrew. How are you? A regular attendee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Matt. Hi, Rachel. My name's Andrew Richards. I'm a CEO of a multi-academy trust. It's my second CEO role. Currently looking after a trust in Leicestershire. That's 9 primary schools. And I'm really excited to be here this afternoon.
Amazing. All right. Thank you, Andrew. And also sitting on our Matter Advisory Board as well as Mark, who now joins us. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. And your role?
Yeah, so I'm Sales Director for Blue Apple Education. We are, in a nutshell, we're a creative design company. Very similar to Rachel, we work exclusively within the education sector. And personally, I present at lots of different events around the UK and further afield on topics all around school marketing, branding, communications, basically making sure that schools know how to present themselves to the outside world. I sit on the Matter Advisory Board. I'm the host of Out of the Blue, which is a video podcast, lots and lots of different topics around branding and marketing as well. So hopefully I have something to bring.
Yep, and you can tell that he hosts something else because his audio quality is top. So, yeah, brilliant. Well, welcome to the panel, Mark. So how this will work, if there's any late joiners, we can answer any audience questions. So on your comment section, whether you're on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, we'll make sure to feed them through on screen, and then you can direct that to the entire panel or Rachel, Andrew, Mark, or myself. So just to get started, we'll start with quite an open question. Why is branding and trust, that kind of vision that we hear a lot about now, why is that so important? And we'll start with you, Andrew, with your CEO hat on.
It has been important, hasn't it? Because it's all about whether it's a member of staff, why is that member of staff wanting to come and work for you and your trust? To why should another school want to be part of your trust if you're a trust that's growing? To a parent, why should I send my child to one of the schools in the trust? So it's always been important, but in the current climate, I think it's becoming more and more important in terms of being able to project that vision and that narrative of your multi-academy trust, particularly in this current climate. And for those colleagues who are reading the latest material, if you just take the CEO framework, which has just been released in March, there is a line about organisational leadership that talks specifically about making sure as a trust that your vision, the ethos, the values is understood and is known by all stakeholders. And there's a line in there that talks about branding for the first time in a document that's coming out for schools, for the trust. It's saying brand your organisation. And we're in a sector where the position, the narrative, and is so important now, particularly for all those individuals that are making decisions. Of course, improving school is at the heart, but actually, what are you about as an organisation? What makes you a successful organisation? And are you able to communicate that in a way that not only showcases what you're doing, but also reinforces your vision and your values and the culture of your organisation through staff, parents, community, and any other stakeholders? So I think it's absolutely critical now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about this kind of off air, Andrew, weren't we, around the CEO framework, and very interesting that it's mentioned branding for the very first time. I did a poll a few weeks ago around how marketing as a job role is actually now increasingly popular within trusts and within individual schools as well, but especially at trust level. We'll come to you, Rachel, more on now the culture side of that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's all the points that Andrew mentioned is absolutely key. It's all the different stakeholders, isn't it, that make up the complexities of any educational establishment. And I think branding is seen very much as a corporate tool and task that's been in the corporate world for many, many years. And I think the education world, especially with the white paper that came out, albeit that's in hiatus at the moment, but I think the timeline is what it is. I think it's this competitiveness for getting the number of pupils coming to your school, the recruitment and retention crisis that we've seen for many, many years, from leadership right down to, dare I say it, even support staff who can get more money in their local communities. So trying to make out why working for your trust is important, but then also keeping a fine balance between, and it depends very much on the type of trust that you are, because some trusts, going back to that branding image, have literally, uniform signage, the mats upon their doors, everything. So you certainly know the sort of establishments that you're going in are that sort of trust. That doesn't mean if they don't have that they've not got a branding. I think there's a level of different branding and marketing, and I think websites, information, and other things that they have, and that's about the culture, isn't it? The feel of the place. And I think we've probably all visited a number of educational establishments ourselves, and staff and pupils. It's like when you go and visit your own a new home, a prospective house that you're buying. It's a similar sort of thing. It's that feeling, and it can be sometimes seen from the website, which is why I think the corporate image from a website is very important now. Those words, corporate image, you just wouldn't have used in an education setting 5 or 10 years ago, but it is very, very important. Is it obvious that a school is part of a trust, and therefore what is added that they're part of that organisation, for staff, for leaders, from a CPD point of view, from succession, from a well-being point of view, from a culture point of view, but also then for all the other different stakeholders, why is it great that this school is part of this trust? It shouldn't dilute from the individual school's feelings and settings, be it a primary school or a high school, be it a smaller setting, one form entry to a very large special school or high school round the corner. You can still have different feels and looks, but there should be that vision and ethos. And I suppose, and that's where it comes into, if you're a school and you're choosing which multi-academy trust to go into, you're actually, if you think about it, even selling the trust and the vision to a different set of stakeholders, i.e. new potential schools, or indeed sounding even more corporate, dare I say it, mergers and acquisitions are happening all the time in the mat world now, where mats are taking over mats, not just one skeleton mat, single mats, but big mats are taking over big mats, and that's what we're happening more and more. So this corporate sort of feel is what's happening. And that, I think, feels a bit odd. I think it's an oddity for some leaders, and certainly for staff and maybe pupils, and for parents as well. So it's trying to get a balance that the corporate world isn't taking over for the bad. It's all the benefits that can come from that, the ease and understanding of an organisation for all those stakeholders, and the benefits and the positives for the staff. And the pupils, etc. And I think that's what the branding and the culture is key, because of well-being for pupils, but also for staff too.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rachel. And we'll come on to well-being, I'm sure, very shortly. Mark, coming to yourself, you speak with a lot of trusts around those kind of key elements around branding and vision and really kind of advertising the school or the trust values. So what are you hearing from kind of trust leaders recently, especially with this sector being very challenging in mainstream news?
Yeah, I think what I've noticed really probably over the last 18 months, 2 years, is the speed at which there is a professionalism that's been adopted within the marketing role within trusts. It was very much something that was neglected, and they never really had that internal expertise, and to a certain extent, they still don't. And I think what's happening is there's been a recognition. You did your poll, Matt, and we got sort of quite a few results back from trusts that I think 67% said that they had a marketing lead. The issue is there's a lack of understanding as to what that marketing lead should be. And I think very often trusts are basically bringing in people with some design experience or perhaps a little bit of social media experience on a relatively low salary, and hoping that there's going to be this strategic development and how they're going to see marketing make this massive difference and link into their strategic aims. And it's not going to happen. Basically, there needs to be a recognition that actually, if you went out into the corporate world and you looked at organizations the size of some of these trusts, they would be paying much higher salaries for a much better qualified person to take control of that area. So I think there needs to be a movement within trusts to look at marketing as a senior role, to include the marketing lead in those senior decisions, and within those meetings, they need to know what's going on. I ran a course for you guys down in London a few months ago, Matt, and there was a conversation there there were some CEOs who attended and there were some marketing managers who attended. And the marketing managers were saying, we're never privy to these sorts of this sort of information. We don't understand strategically what the trust needs from us. We will very often just be told that school needs a new prospectus. Can you sort the website out? There's nothing strategic about that. And the CEO was quite surprised to realize that, okay, yeah, there is a link there. We've got to recognize that the marketing role within trust has to have KPIs. It has to be monitored. You have to manage what it's there to do, what's it there to produce. So we need to develop that trust in marketing. People in education have not seen marketing create results before, but it can. You've got to have that sort of trust in it. And the reason that, coming back to your original question, Matt, the reason why it's so important now is that as mats have developed, we've seen this professional development. We've seen mats coming out to experts like the people we're talking to today, getting expert advice, bringing in expertise. And mats that aren't thinking that way, that aren't linking marketing to their strategic goals, are going to fall behind very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Because that is really starting to gain pace now.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really good points there, Mark, and we'll come to touch on them in a little bit more detail soon. I'm just going to come back to Rachel quickly as well. Just some of those tangible differences that you experience with the schools and the trusts that you work with when they do get culture right as well. What are some of those kind of examples quickly?
I think it's quite easy to say that, obviously looking at it from different perspectives. Obviously, from a director of HR, I would say that, you know, we've had a massive flux in the economy to do with people changing jobs, etc., since post-COVID, and education have been hit. But I think it's why would you want to stay working here? You know, the pay of teachers is a national issue. No school is going to deal with that. But I think it's more about the non-tangibles, why you want to work for that particular leader in that particular school, and well-being and flexibility and all that sort of cultural issues. You know, do you feel you've got the support of your SLT just coming in, and it's the small things that are important. So I think from a staff point of view, that's really key. I think more, but linking into that, which is strategic, it is about not just what makes them happy on a day-to-day basis or on a weekly basis, but, you know, from a professional point of view, the investment in that staff, and that support staff as well as teachers. You know, where do they see their job or their role progressing, changing, developing in the next 2, 3, 5 years? And I think maths are absolutely key here, because then they've got the opportunity to say, but it's not just in this school. You know, you've got an opportunity to get experience, potentially work with networking, a lot easier within maths, across maths, opportunities for developing and getting and succeeding and being promoted across the maths, that sort of thing, and having mentors from a wider variety rather than just one school. So I think from a HR perspective, recruitment and retention, well-being as strategic is key, right from recruitment on your adverts, on your website, but not having it as a tick box, having that feeling, having it on agendas all the time, and ensuring that it changes. You know, it's quite interesting what Mark was saying there, to do with saying how marketing needs information and being involved and sitting around the table. I think HR 10, 15 years ago probably would have said exactly the same things. HR directors were this big thing, isn't it, on the blueprint of what used to be the regional school commissioners, that all maths would have a HR director. But before then, who had a HR director sitting on their boards at SLT level in schools? None. So if you think about it, that's a development over the educational landscape that has really changed. And I think even then, though, everybody understands that each school might be different in their HR need. So it's interesting that marketing is sort of coming up behind and experiencing maybe what HR has experienced for the last 15 to 20 years. There's no point saying our attendance for staff is bad, go do something about it. It's about, well, hang on a minute, what's the culture? What are the keys? What are the KPIs? Why is it bad? Let's have a look at the whys and the wherefores and the trends, rather than just, you know, get my attendance back up, or I want better shortlisting. You need to be involved in that bigger strategic organisational input and understanding in the drivers. So I completely understand that what Mark is saying, that sometimes operationally very task-driven jobs for marketeers, they need to understand the bigger picture, and that's like HR as well, and that's all then feeds into your culture. But cultures do change. You know, you can have a school that's outstanding, that doesn't have any issues. 3 years down the line, that can be very different, and it could be even be with the same leaders, because it could be about where, you know, your community shifts and changes, or it could be a leadership change, or it could be just that people are coming and there are changes and developments, or indeed they go and join a MAT that's different, and you know, not one size fits all. So I think it'll be very interesting when Ofsted starts their inspections of MATs, how the branding and the trust and the culture of MATs come out of that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And Andrew, as CEO of the Trust, your reaction to some of the things that Rachel's mentioned there?
I totally agree. I think coming back to what you're talking about as well, Mark, is there can't be a disconnect now between what we traditionally think of marketing. We're going to put a flyer out, we're going to do this. That's not marketing. How can branding, marketing, perception support the trust to drive its aims in a climate that's rapidly changing, where those trusts that are on the ahead of the game are going to actually succeed? And it all goes back to, what's a strong trust? We're moving to a situation now, we're going to have 5 pillars. Those 5 pillars there's going to be some definitions of what those individual pillars mean in terms of standards for the expectations of trust. Rachel's talked about talent, staffing, school improvement, all those things. And I would say to every member of the leadership team who are listening to this podcast, to think out the box and think, hang on a minute, rather than going and finding somebody and asking them to do an X or a Y or a flyer, make sure they're part of the executive leadership team. How can this element, this strand of the organisation support us in trying to develop our strategic aims? And that's the mindset that we've got to get into, because those trusts that are using the huge skills of marketing, people who can market organisations to promote their agenda and support their agenda are going to be successful. And that's the mindset, because we're in a generation where branding, marketing, perception, narrative, and that strategy is absolutely critical, whether it's in a community that's got a particular issue with the school, or whether it's underachievement of youngsters because they've got lack of aspirations, whether you're trying to recruit staff to an organisation that's really difficult to recruit to. Well, let's look at it differently. And I think that's the exciting thing. And I think, unlike where we were when, Rachel, you talked about HR, and I agree with you, years ago, but I think things are moving faster now. And the white paper, believe you me, that's mentioned in all the documentation. The essence of the white paper is the basic fundamentals. So we are moving at a pace, and we need to wake up, I think, as organisations.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. And I know that I've done a post about that on LinkedIn recently as well, quoting a few words even from yourself. So just looking at kind of how the landscape is at the moment, and I speak to some trusts and they're going through the worst time of recruitment possible and really struggling to recruit. And then I was speaking to a 16 school, Matt, the other week as well at an event, and they were saying how they were doubled up on numbers to where they were last year with a kind of new and improved teaching hub that they'd just opened. How important is culture with trying to retain and recruit this new wave of workforce coming through? And this can be, anything to do with how they help with workload, how they're coming across as an attractive employer. Over to you. I'll kind of open that up really to the whole room.
Well, I think it's fundamental, really. It forms the basis of that judgment call that people are going to make. If you look at the adverts that traditionally schools have placed for any position within a school, more often than not, those adverts will tell you what you need to have to work within our school. They very, very rarely tell you what you will get and why it's of benefit to work for this organisation. And only recently do you see that starting to appear in job adverts. And you could still go on the TES now and you will see so many adverts that just look exactly the same as all the others. Now, the trusts that are going to be doubling up on numbers, as you say, are the trusts that have recognised that, who've got a handle on their brand, and their brand is running through every way that they communicate. And it makes everything they do so much simpler to do, because you're not sat wondering how to pitch anything, because you understand what your brand is. You understand how you talk about your organization. You understand who you are, what people value in what you do. And so you understand how to talk about yourselves. And that makes writing a job advert simple. It makes recruiting staff in other ways simple. It makes recruiting prospective new parents and attracting them into the school. It makes it all so much simpler because you know how to talk about yourselves. And I think that's the key. That's all to do with brand and how the brand influences the culture, because that then has to ring true. When those people walk through the front door, the brand that you've presented in your marketing, etc., in your job advert, has to ring true. It has to be the same when you walk through the door. There has to be a consistency between the two. That way, not only do you attract the right staff, but you retain them as well, because you put your money where your mouth is. You do all the CPD developments. You do offer a great working environment. You do offer, transients between the different schools and the ability to work in different areas. If I was a teacher, and I'm not, but if I was, if I was an NQT, the world's my oyster at the minute. I can go and work anywhere I want. And if I'm a young person, I probably geographically move wherever I want to as well. So that's what you're competing with. You've got to attract people in. Yeah,
absolutely. And Rachel, I think that you were about to comment there as well before Mark, but you're absolutely right, Mark. I don't know whether it was the opposite a few years ago, where the schools were flooded with teachers, and the teachers were scrapping over jobs. But now it's very much on its head.
I think even when that wasn't the case, Matt, I would sit with schools that would say we just can't recruit teachers, and within 5 minutes you could tell them why.
And I think this is about. You're right, Mark. And we're in a different generation. The expectations are higher, the support expectations are higher, and they should be. So I'm an NQT, a newly qualified member of staff coming into an organisation. How am I going to be looked after? What support am I going to get? Have I got a career path? Or I'm a middle manager coming in. I'm ambitious. What's the trust in the school going to do to support me, to train me? And all those things that quite traditionally it was go on the website, fill the application form, and it's all about hearsay. Actually, the trusts that are really thinking this through and saying, actually, we're spotting talent. This is how we will support you. These are the kind of things. It's making that organisation more. And again, you're right. It is branding, it's culture, it's promotion, it's all those things that the world of business has been doing very successfully for a long time, and schools and the public sector sometimes are behind the curve on that.
Yep, absolutely. And Rachel, any kind of final comments on that as well?
Yeah, I think for me it's about, and again, this is very much about branding and culture. I think something that education sector has again traditionally been behind the curve on, to do with workforce is to do with flexibility within that workforce, and I think that was turned on its head clearly through the COVID years, and a lot of the staff are still wanting to retain some of that flexibility and what we're doing now, from training, from governance meetings, for leaders. Why do you all have to be sitting in a room at 8 o'clock at night? Why can't you all be on your sofas instead? I'm thinking of head teachers here who've been in that school since goodness dawn o'clock in the morning. I get that I think personally it's all about a hybrid, it's a mixture. I think it's about the fact that I appreciate some roles it's very difficult to offer that flexibility as much, maybe higher up or support staff, but it is there, and there are schools that are, and multi-academy trusts that are doing it. So for me it's about exactly what Andrew was saying before. It's about that lateral thinking. It's about trying to resolve problems and issues, and marketing is great for me. We use it in One Education internally and to support schools. What's the problem? How can you, in one sense, as outsiders, think laterally and maverickly, dare I say that word? I know it's got negative connotations, to resolve problems and maybe to nip things in the bud so they don't. So recruitment isn't an issue because your retention is so great and your succession planning. I personally work in a team where all my HR managers have never been recruited from outside because we have succession planning. We succession planned. That's an amazing thing to say. But I work for multi-academy trusts who, have so much amazing CPD in their senior leaders and middle managers, because they appreciate it. It's not just about curriculum and their subjects. It's about the fact that many, many different sectors are like this. The management skills aren't actually invested in. So when you then, nipping things in the bud, speaking, addressing issues, that sort of thing, nobody's really trained on that. Equality issues, mediation, all that sort of thing. It's all picked up along the way, and you either are good at it or, dare I say, not so good, and you deal with grievances or complaints, or you sort of mop your brow and think, wow, I got away with that. But it's actually investing time and money into that sort of thing that then you can then do the jazz hands about from a marketing point of view of, this is why it's good to work in this organisation. This is why it's good to stay in this organisation, because we will invest in you. We will be flexible for you, and your well-being. We've seen recently, haven't we, at the beginning of this month, that the DfE has released all to do with, you know, the feeling of the workload of the change. What's it called? The working lives of teachers and leaders. I don't think it's a huge document. I don't think there's any surprises in that document, but it really does, for me, one of the big answers is your branding of your culture and your trust, of why certain results on the survey were surprising, because some staff will go, you know what, even though I had issues, I was looked after from a personal point of view, or if I was struggling in a role, or if I wanted to change, or if I wanted to leave, people went, oh no, don't leave, what can we do to keep you? And it's those sorts of investment in staff that's absolutely key. It's trying to nip things in the bud from a parental or pupil point of view. And again, education has traditionally been a sector where, you know, people talk about schools, be it the staff, be it the pupils, be it the parents, on social media or in the playground or whatever. And therefore the communities will know that the sort of people and the ethos and that culture and that feeling, and they'll know if it's a good place to work or if it's a good place to send their kids. And from a marketing point of view, that's why it's such a challenge if it's traditionally got a bad vibe, because you've got to turn that round. But it's also great when you've got that amazing community credit out there, because that's what you can latch onto, and that's why people will stay and people will apply. And that's why, in one sense, it's getting these people who are professionals, these marketeers, who you can say, right, we're a disadvantaged school, we're in special measures, we've just joined this trust, how can we recruit? You know what, some marketeers and some trusts have amazing ways of turning things around and actually adding value to those schools, and therefore just doing the same old thing time and time again isn't going to help. And I think, dare I say it, sometimes local authorities did a lot of these roles. Local authorities, you know, did those communication plans, did whatever in the 20 odd years ago, and MATs now it's their role to have that communication strategy with parents and pupils and all the other stakeholders. And it's those strategic elements that are so important for culture. It doesn't mean that each school can't have their different nuances. And I think it's that layering that's so important for governors, for trustees and for staff to understand, that joining a multi-academy trust that's even really well developed and got all this doesn't take away from their own feeling from themselves. It's an added layer rather than a dilution. And I think that's really, really important to get across.
Brilliant. Well, I know that it's only a kind of shortened episode with it all being Easter, and people hopefully on their nice sunny holidays, unlike myself in Stockport. But I just want to kind of end on a bit of a note that it does definitely seem like such a tipping point at the moment. Especially at teaching level, that is the new rail and train operators of a year ago. It's in mainstream news everywhere. Everybody knows the latest on industrial action and that side of things. So yeah, extremely important today to highlight how much branding your trust and culture really can help with trust performance, staff retention, and have some tangible examples there that Mark, Rachel, Andrew have ran through there. So any closing comments from any of you on here?
No, just thanks for your time. It was a good chat. Thanks, everyone.
No more talk. Do something about it, trust leaders.
There we go.
That sums it up very well.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's certainly something to invest in, because
Absolutely.
I think it's one of these areas that I think it's very difficult to say, you know, these big amounts of money to invest in. Well, what we're going to get our return? Our return is hopefully it will resolve some of the ongoing issues within your schools and within the education sector. So it's not necessarily you're going to see the KPI difference straight away. It is investing, because branding, it's investing in all your stakeholders. That's the thing to do with branding and culture.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all three for your time. Thank you, Stephanie and Paula, as well, for your kind comments. Hopefully you'll see us in a few weeks on the next kind of hottest topic that we're facing at the moment. So thank you very much and take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.